The saga continues in the never-ending story of Epic Games versus what seems to be the world. Now, I'm sure you've heard this story come up again and again, really over the past 4 years, but just to give you a last time on Dragon Ball Z, Epic has had lawsuits against Apple and now Google. Those are the two big ones, and I think they've actually had multiple lawsuits with these companies if you count the fact that they've got lawsuits in America and the European Union. But just focusing on the US, the Epic Games versus Apple lawsuit kind of ended in a sort of stalemate. I think Apple was the overall victor, but not by a landslide. But in the case of Epic versus Google, yeah, that's an entirely different story. Now, that started in 2020 and actually ended at the end of last year, and basically the whole thing ended in Epic Games' favor. Now, the whole thing centered around Google's Play Store on Android devices. Basically, Epic Games was alleging that Google had a sort of monopoly on their hands, and that their platform, the Epic Games Store, was in many ways suppressed by Google's overall dominance with their Play Store. Also brought into question was the fact of the revenue share that Google takes in, apparently, from all of their apps that are sold on their platform. Now, like I said, late last year, so this was December of 2023, this case was officially resolved, basically siding with Epic, stating that Google had violated multiple antitrust laws, and that basically, in a nutshell, they had to tone things down on their strategies to suppress their own competition. Now, right now, Google is planning to appeal this verdict, but something that has now come to light with the Epic Games versus Google saga is that there is another antagonist here. Much like Captain Ginyu in Dragon Ball Z, there was always a person behind it, and that person is Samsung. Okay, these Dragon Ball Z references are a little lame. I guess I'll tone down on them. But in all seriousness, yeah, Epic Games has actually brought in Samsung now to this whole crazy legal mess. Now, if you remember, all of these allegations against Google and their Play Store all were centered around Samsung devices, or I guess I should call them Android devices. Now, after the conclusion of the December 2023 hearing of Epic versus Google, Epic then brought the Epic Games Store onto Android devices. However, it would seem that this is still considered a third-party sort of platform, sort of app store, and Epic is now claiming that Samsung is essentially treating them in ways that are restrictive or frustrating and complicated at best. Yeah, I don't have an Android device, but apparently in order to access the Epic Games Store on one, it's allegedly pretty difficult. You have to jump through numerous hoops, and you get a lot of security warnings, and, well, the whole grievance here from Epic is really centered around Samsung's auto blocker feature. Now, this is something that is now activated by default on their new Android devices. Now, this apparently does prevent people from installing things that are not made by Google or Samsung onto their Android devices. I think it is possible, but I mean, you have to jump through like certain warning windows, stuff like that. Essentially, like I said, it sounds like you have to jump through more hoops. Now, Samsung has already came out and denied this and basically said that this auto blocker feature is completely optional and that it is just a security measure, and it's not an intentional way to suppress competition like Epic may be hinting at or alleging here. Now, it is worth mentioning too, the Epic CEO Tim Sweeney has came out and said that right now there is no official concrete evidence that Google and Samsung are actually working together as a form of like synergy and doing this whole auto blocker thing intentionally to suppress the Epic Games Store, but he's hoping that the knowledge of something like this actually occurring, you know, if it is actually happening, he is hoping that gets unveiled in the sort of rollout now of this new sort of lawsuit against Samsung. Google and Samsung intentionally working together to suppress the competition. Yeah, that would be like the white whale of legal findings here. I mean, that would be huge. I don't know if Epic is going to actually come to that conclusion. I don't know if they will find concrete evidence of that. But at the very least, you know, if Samsung is maybe unintentionally suppressing the competition of Epic, which is in favor of the Google Play Store, that is definitely something that is worth looking into according to Epic. So that is where we are at with this seemingly never-ending story. I tell you what though, if Epic can somehow come out and prove some sort of collusion intentionally between Google and Samsung to suppress competition, I mean, I'm not saying we haven't seen anything like that in our world before, but I mean, with two huge companies like Google and Samsung, well, you can already imagine the consequences, the legal turmoil that they would be in would be huge. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We all have to take this huge case, this huge legal saga one day at a time. You know, what started out as something that I thought was hilarious, you know, Epic trying to to like, Apple and Google, has turned out to actually be working quite well for Epic. But now they are bringing another huge competitor into the mix, Samsung. It's going to continue to make things more interesting. I don't know how Samsung exactly will respond. We'll have to wait and see.